First of all, just to thank all of the witnesses for being with us today. This legislation is an opportunity to ensure people with disabilities, people with mental health difficulties and others will have guaranteed input into decisions that affect them. However, it obviously has aspects that are of concern to representative groups, and I think we obviously all agree on the importance of the legislation, but it's essential that it's done correctly and with the best interests and those who it intends to support at its heart. If it's okay, Chair, I'll start with two questions for mental health reform and in the independent living movement, and then I'm going to come back with more questions if there's time, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's no problem. If you can just direct exactly to which person you want to. Thanks, Holly.
Perfect. So the first question is for mental health reform, and you said director, but either for Fiona or Burr. In your written submission, you call for the Decision Support Service to maintain a register of advanced healthcare directives. That's a statement that you can make on the type of medical or surgical treatment that you want or don't want if you're unable to make these decisions in the future. So I presume the concern is that in emergencies where a person has lost capacity due to mental health crisis, how would a healthcare professional be aware of an advanced healthcare directive without a register like that? So I just wondering if you could elaborate on the importance of amending the bill to provide for registering AHDs for the committee. And I think the questions around 16, 7-year-olds have kind of been answered by Burr, the specific changes we can make there. And for the independent living movement, my question is for Peter. The written submission that you made referred to the absence of reference to what decisions the assisted decision-making capacity will support disabled people on making. So you said there's a need to kind of explicitly reference things like advanced care directives, choice of where and with whom you live, and the full expression of human experiences, including the right to relationships. So I just think it's really important for the committee to hear maybe you elaborate on the importance of explicitly including these references in the bill. I'll come back in afterwards. Thank you.
And Peter, we'll go to yourself first if you want to come in on that question. Thanks.
Hi, Holly. Thanks for the question. It's really about the will and preference and the capacity building of disabled people to make effective will and preference choices. And it's very much about the linking as much as the ADMT relation to the UN Convention, the actual articles are very good on effective participation and how to go about it. So it's really about capacity building disabled people, and again with DPO, so if we learn the role of DPO was to give confidence to disabled people to make effective that will and preference, and also that to separate it from the baggage that goes for people's impairment label as well. So it's okay how it is.
You okay? Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much, Peter. Then it's Fiona. Are you going to come in on the other question? Thanks.
Yeah, I can come in and Burke can add if there's any more information needed. But yeah, like an advanced healthcare directive, as we know, it's kind of a statement to set out someone's when they have the capacity to make those decisions, their will and preference for care and for treatment. And as you can imagine, that can be really important in relation to those who may be receiving inpatient mental health treatment in the future. And the point that we made in our written submission is one that we were echoing a point that was raised by the director of the DSS in relation to there currently is not a provision for the DSS to hold a register of these advanced healthcare directives. And I think as you so put it, it would leave if there was a kind of a situation where someone is unable to communicate their will and preference, how will the clinician, or how will the advocate, how will someone know that something is in place? And it's a very logical piece to be inserted into the legislation to give the authority to the DSS to ensure that there is a registry there, and that way that registry can be consulted. It's a decision we feel is quite straightforward suggestion, but it would really ensure that the rights and the will and preferences of those, in particular those with mental health difficulties, where there may be a time that they may not be able to communicate their will and preferences, that there is a process where something they have laid out is accessible and it's followed. Otherwise, they may be just simply, engaging in a process, and a document will be put on the shelf somewhere and no one ever have access to it. So, yeah, I think it's a really important point. Yeah. I don't know if Bear wants to add anything really quickly.
Yeah, just to say that as it stands, the legislation provides for the Director of the Decision Support Service to keep a register of the decision-making support agreements. So when Miss Anya Flynn was in front of the Disability Matters Committee last May 2021 on this piece of legislation, she specifically said, it would be useful, it would be helpful to have a register of advanced healthcare directives. I believe the delay is around a unique identifier, but from the meetings that we've had, we're on the HSE implementation steering group as well, is that there is widespread support for a register for advanced healthcare directives, and I believe they're in before the committee tomorrow afternoon as well.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Do you have other questions?
Yeah, if that's okay. So my next question is for the National Platform Self-Advocates, so for Joe and for Dermot. Yeah. You talked about making sure that people in charge, like the Minister, the Decision Support Service and IREC, the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission, talk directly with people with disabilities.
Yeah, because I find when I'm coming back from a meeting and I say, the law is coming in, and the lads in our day service, they don't sometimes listen. And then the staff would say, oh, sorry, I haven't got time. I have to go out with your man to bring him somewhere. I bring him to the pictures. And we go, but it's coming in. Have you not got the file on the government law yet? And they go, no, we don't know anything about it. So, like, if the organisation don't know anything about it, how are we going to know? Like, if they don't know, how are we going to know? Or the CEOs that want to be brought in here and told that they should know. Exactly. They've loads of people working there. So I find that you kind of just go in and you tell members of the platform, but you don't tell the others. Because I think there should be, all staff should be trained. It's great to go to college and train about disability, but when they come in training for your day service, you say, love, sorry, this is the real world here. You might be looking at a professor in your college, talking to your college in this sector or that in disability law. But when he comes into the real workshop, he knows someday that your man could be in a bad humour and he might tell you to piss off and he won't hold back. So in the real world, you see, it's great to go to college and go to Blanche, but when you come into our service, it's totally different. Yeah. Someone might be in a bad humour and they let you know.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay. Joe wants to come in too. So
the CRPD make sure that we're included in the law, because if you don't implement that and talk to our organisations, you're going to find yourself in a muddle of intrigue to try and get bills through the door if the legislation isn't inclusive or acted upon with dignity for everyone that has a disability, intellectual or not, because we all learn in different ways. If we all went to the same school and learned the same way, we'd be geniuses by now, some of us.
That's it. And I think you rightly point out the the CRPD there, and for too long this piece of legislation has been used as an excuse to delay the ratification of the optional protocol on that. So I think we can all look forward to that not being an excuse anymore. I have one more question for John, Chair, if that's okay. I think you raised lots of issues that we need to look for answers for, but you discussed how appointed decision-making representatives receive a kind of expense and remuneration, but there's no provision for family carers acting as decision-making representatives, and it seems to be just another case of the state taking family carers for granted. But I suppose, I know Deputy Dillon asked a bit about this, but I wonder, can you elaborate on the type of expenses the carers currently have when acting as decision-making representatives? Because we've had feedback in terms of, the cost of disability report, and we know that the additional cost of having a disability in Ireland is, minimum between 9,000 and 12,000 a year. We don't hear much about what it costs when you're, a carer for somebody with disabilities too, who's on, the bare minimum disability allowance. So I think it would be really important for the committee to understand the added cost.
We had an understanding, or we thought we had an understanding with the Minister for Social Protection, the then Minister, that in commissioning the cost of disability survey, they'd also be doing one on the cost of caring, but in practice it just went ahead as the cost of disability. I'm happy to report we commissioned our own cost of caring one, and we'll be launching it within the next month or so, and it's using the same methodology by the same body, so it's kind of very like with like. To be fair, we're not trying to recover the costs of caring here, but we are kind of saying that there are practical costs. At the moment, the carer's allowance is marginally above the job seeker's benefit or allowance level, marginally. In order to qualify for the carer's allowance, you have to be providing a minimum of 40 hours full-time care a week, and there's all sorts of restrictions around what you can and can't do while you're getting the allowance. Including, for example, you can sit at home and read novels or magazines to your heart's content, but if you read a textbook to do a course, that's counted as work and you lose your carer's allowance. Pretty bizarre rule if you want to think about it. Mm-hmm. But so you have a situation where carers are getting negligible increase on what they get as a job seeker, and they have to do at least 40 hours caring a week, some of it quite onerous. That's the backdrop. Now we have a situation where, if you like, in addition to doing the work, they have to comply with regulations and rules, which means they have to be conversant with them. They have to submit periodic reports. They have to account for what they're doing. To people, there's a lot of people in Ireland whose job is to go in and say, well, this is what you need. Unfortunately, we don't have the resources to give it to you. If we'd fewer people going in telling you what you need and more people delivering the resources, we might have a better match-up. So we're simply saying, as a matter of principle, if a lawyer is going to be hired, nobody's going to argue with the principle that the lawyer is spending his time or her time on this. They deserve to be paid for that time. I think the thinking is a fairly modest amount now. I don't think anyone's going to get rich out of being a decision-making representative. And then such expenses as they may have, and I'll be perfectly honest, I don't know what they might be, but again, I would think they'd be fairly minimal. The point we're making is really one of principle. If it's good enough for, let's say, the lawyers, then why on earth isn't it good enough for the family members who are doing exactly the same thing? It's on top of what they have to do already, so why wouldn't they get paid as well?
Absolutely, thank you.
Can I just say on the subject of the register, because that's a really good question, and we totally support the idea of advanced healthcare directive register. I can think of an incident recently where there was an advanced healthcare directive registered. The hospital was aware of it, and treatment was given in the ambulance on the way in because they didn't realise. Now, to be fair, it was an honest mistake, shall we say? But actually, the challenge for us, the register is part of the problem. So you're a family member, you rock up at the hospital, I am so-and-so's decision-making representative. What's the doctor meant to do at 1 o'clock in the morning? Is he meant to take your word for it? Is he meant to go and check somewhere? And where is he going to check? The fact there's a register there isn't of itself sufficient. It's helpful, but it's not actually enough. But I think the point is definitely worth pursuing.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Senator Aaron.